Okay, we're passing out the fourth page of the worksheet. How you doing this morning? Okay, good to see you. The fourth page of the worksheet, that's what we're on. This is a review that we're on. This is the last day of the review. We will get through it today, and then we'll get into chapter 18 as soon as we're finished this review. When we left off last time, we were on page 4 of your worksheet, and we were on the chapter 13 portion there that talked about this unholy trinity. And if you look up here, you'll see this unholy trinity is Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And we talked about how there are two beasts, the first and second beast. The first beast being the Antichrist, the second beast being the false prophet. The false prophet comes on the scene, and he's the one that is used by Satan and the Antichrist to point people toward the Antichrist and say, he's the one, much like the Holy Spirit does in pointing us toward Christ. So that's where we left off, and we left off on 13b, and that's something that I would like for you to do, and let's open our Bibles up to chapter 13 of the book of Revelation. A couple of things I want to point out for you. Last week when we were talking, I told you that the term beast can be used both of an individual, the Antichrist, and of the entire system, right? We talked about that, the system of the beast. That's the governmental system. It's the political system. It's the system that he has developed. So we have that, and we also have him being spoken of as a person. So in the first 4 verses of chapter 13, you'll see where in verses 1 and 2, it's speaking of a system, and then in 3 and 4, it's speaking of the person. So I'm going to read this for you. And again, I've got the old King James Version, so bear with me as we go through this. But here's what it says. It says, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Well, there it's talking about a system. And we're going to look and see in just a few minutes here of what this beast is and what that beast with all these heads and horns and what that all means. But that's the political system. That's the commercial and political system that will be coming, that is going to be called the beast. That's the Antichrist system. And then in 3 and 4, let's go to verse 3, it says, And I saw one of his heads as though it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon who gave power to the beast, and worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Well, here they're talking about the Antichrist, and they're talking about the one who will receive a wound. It'll be a mortal head wound. We learned that. But he will either be dead or appear to be dead, and then he will be resurrected or appear to be resurrected by Satan. So it goes from talking about in the first 2 verses about the system and the second 2 verses about the person. And they're used interchangeably. And I think I gave you the example last time about how the United States is negotiating with North Korea, but it's the president that goes over there to negotiate, but we're saying the United States is doing it. Well, it's the president, so it's an interchangeable term. And that's the same thing that we see here. So I want you to kind of get that in your head, that it could be talking about either one, and you've got to read it in the context to understand which one that it's talking about. Does that make sense? Everybody clear with that? Good deal. And so also some of the folks that haven't attended our classes or are fairly new to the church, make sure you ask questions if this stuff seems fuzzy so that we can cover that. I'm doing a lot of this review, not only to stir our memories up, but also to teach you guys and bring you up to speed with where we are. Okay, so let's go to C there. The Antichrist will be killed by being executed. Is that a true or false statement?
True. Assassination.
Yeah, it's a false statement because we find that he's going to be wounded by the sword, Scripture tells us. And so it appears that he's either going to die through battle or through assassination, one of those two. Remember, he is going to be involved in trying to overthrow 3 of the kings of the 10 kings, if you remember that from last time, right? Daniel talks about in chapter 7, the little horn, that's the Antichrist. He will rip out 3 of the 10 horns, and he will take control over 30% of the kingdom, and that will ultimately give him world control. And so it appears that he will appear to be killed, and I use that term because we're not quite sure if he's going to be literally killed or it's going to appear to be killed, because we're not sure if God will give Satan the ability to raise someone from the dead. Right now he doesn't have that ability, but God may do that to allow him to raise the Antichrist up. The second beast, in D, the second beast will order an image of the Antichrist to be set up and worshipped. That's a true statement. Let's go to verse 11. Verse 11 there, 11 through 15. Who can read that for me? Verse 11 through 15.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed.
Okay, that's good. Notice that in verse 14 it says he was wounded by a sword. And notice also that in verse 11 that he's like a lamb with two horns and speaks like a dragon. He's like a lamb. Who do we know that's a lamb? The Lamb of God, right? He's the one that is, so it's a religious person, but he speaks like a dragon, and therefore he is satanic. So the second beast will order that image of the Antichrist to be set up. He's going to fulfill the role that we see up here of the dove, which testifies of the son, and the son here is the Antichrist, who is the son of Satan, the dragon.
Fake news.
Huh?
Fake news.
Fake news, okay. That's probably the epitome of it, right? All right, so then we have, the next one is this mark of the beast. This thing here. Really interesting as we look at that. The question is, the mark of the beast is a commercial identification mark and has no religious meaning. Is that true or false?
False.
That's false, right? Because why? Well, because we find that this mark of the beast is something, while it is commercial, it's something that everyone has to wear in order to be to get paid or to have a job, and it's going to track everybody wherever they go. But in addition to that, we find that the people, and I think that's in chapter 14, there's a real interesting statement that's made. Let me see if I can find that for us. Yeah, go to chapter 14, verse 9. This to me is one of the angels that we'll be looking at in a second. This third angel. And so this third angel comes down, it says, and followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink the wine of wrath which God pours out," etc. But notice that it says that he worships first in verse 9. If any man worship the beast, that's first. And what's the second thing that happens? He receives his mark. So the mark is placed upon a person after he worships. And they, in essence, have committed themselves spiritually to this beast, and then they receive that mark which goes on his hand. And we talked about this mark, and it probably won't look like that or like that, but it will be some mark that's going to be apparent on the outside, so that's a control mechanism. We talked about that, where the police can look at it and say, that person's not marked, that person needs to be arrested and tried, right? And the other purpose of that mark is to track people transactions, people that will be going into, let's say, to the Superdome to go to a football game, and an amazing system it would be, and man, a great management system. Hang on just a second. A great management system. Can you imagine, as the guy that runs the Superdome, he would know how many people, he would know what age distribution, he would know what race distribution they are, he would know everything about everybody coming in to that facility, and then when they leave, he'd probably get a report that says, wait, we're missing one person, somebody's still in there. Not only that, they're on the loge floor, and they're in the men's bathroom there. So this thing will track everybody. It will be something that have great transaction analysis. Jeff?
You also said you won't be able to buy or sell without that market.
That's
That tells me that there's a monetary system that's going to be just one monetary system. If you don't have that mark,
That's right.
there's no money.
Yeah.
It's going to be one system, which almost says that there will be a worldwide government.
In order to pull this off, there has to be a worldwide government. There has to be in essence, this will be a cashless type system. It'll be a one world economy with one person controlling everything. And that's how he controls it. And there are the computers today. I mean, this is all very easy to do. It's being done right now through transaction analysis. We do that with your credit card. Imagine a chip being embedded or something like that, to where just scan your hand and they've got all the information that they need.
It's already being done.
Yeah, it's already been, yeah, that's the point, is the technology's already here for all that. So this is not one of these unbelievable things that 20, 30 years ago we said, hey man, that's kind of pushing the envelope. But no, the envelope's here, it's already open, and people are already doing that.
Steve, there was a convention a couple of years ago where people were getting the chip in their hand to enter their office building.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a video up here, we showed that, where over in Sweden, I think, they were embedding a small chip in the fatty part of the hand, and people loved it. I mean, and really, when you think about it, it's very convenient. And, you know, imagine your driver's license information, everything about you in every area. You won't carry a wallet, you don't have to carry all these licenses and all this paperwork. That sounds pretty convenient, you know. So the technology isn't evil, but it's the people that use the technology and how they would use it that would be evil. Steve?
Yeah, I heard they're also trying to herd people into getting the kid chip. Okay, that sounds real good in case they get kidnapped or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, the technology's good, but it's how that technology would be applied.
Well, what
Yeah.
about these, these Echo devices in your house? These, you know, these different Google, you know,
Oh yeah,
Amazon
yeah.
Echo or
Yeah.
Amazon whatever. These, you know, they're supposed to record you, and you speak to it and say, oh, order a 12-pack of soft drinks for me, and it's supposed to record everything that's going on in your house.
Oh yeah.
You know, where does that go? And what is that used for? You know,
Yeah,
what does it pick up, and how
yeah.
can it be used against you
Yeah.
if it's, you know, in the wrong hands?
Yeah, really. I mean, when you think about all the personal information that's out on digital files all over the place, and are always being hacked, and then you find out that your credit card, social security number. I can't imagine how many people have all that information on me, because they've hacked almost every place that I've done business with.
And I could be talking to my dog in a derogatory fashion, and they think it's my wife I'm speaking to. No, the FBI's in my house.
Now, you don't call your puppy Heather, do you?
Her name
It
is
just seems
Charlie.
to me they've been being brought to this point incrementally since the 80s, and so that, you know, our children and our children's children, they may not know any better unless we teach them the Word of God.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we certainly are numb, I guess you might say, to the technology, and we're used to it. And again, the computers aren't evil, and the technology and the scanners aren't evil. I mean, they're very, very functional purposes. It's just that that's the world that we live in, and that's where it's headed. And it's just a matter of coordinating this to get all that information. Now, come to you in a second, Frank.
Well, I don't mean to totally switch gears, but I have an unmarked-related question.
Okay, hold on a second,
So-
Frank.
Yeah, I think in the schools, a lot of your schools now, you have to have some type of laptop, electronic notebook.
Mhm.
They're saying that the paper notebooks and script will be gone in a few years.
Yeah, well, it's just technology is all over our lives now. Carrie, your question?
No, so I'm going back to the either assassination or assassination attempt. I know
Right.
we've kind of been talking in this class that, you know, he's either going to be killed or appear to be killed.
Right.
And here it does say that he is going to be killed. So I understand that if it's like an assassination attempt, then he didn't really die, then that's not the resurrection. But
Right.
if he is killed and then comes back,
That's a resurrection.
that's still God's doing then, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a.
That's just what I was.
Yeah, look at chapter 13, verse 14. Chapter
Like
13.
he's not doing that crusade, he's doing that.
Not-
God.
Just go to chapter 13, verse 14. Let's go there. And why don't you read that for us, Carrie? What does that say? Just that first sentence right there.
And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast. Telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life.
Okay. In my verse of that, what version do you have there?
I have the NASB.
NASB? All right. Here's what King James says. And he deceiveth those that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do. The power that was given to him. All right? So we have to understand that anything that the Antichrist does, anything that the false prophet does, and anything that Satan does, God has given him the power to do. God may give him the power to resurrect the Antichrist. That may be part of the whole process that God is allowing as part of this judgment. And we have to recognize that any power that's given, though, comes from heaven, and heaven, Christ, is the one who's opening the seals that allows these things to happen. All right? So whether he's physically raised from the dead or appears to be raised, it's almost immaterial because the power comes from heaven to do anything that's done, the authority.
Okay.
Okay, good. Any other question on that before we move forward? All right, so then we're on chapter 14, and we're talking about,
Steve,
yes.
I'm sorry, one more thing. Can
Sure.
you just go over those, tell us which ones are true from chapter 13?
Okay, chapter 13. A is false. The two beasts spoken of there are the Antichrist and the false prophet. B is true. The beast is not only a person, but also a system. We read that this morning. C, the Antichrist will be killed by being executed. That's false. We found out he's wounded by a sword that is violence. And that's either probably from an assassination attempt or in battle. D, the second beast will order an image of the Antichrist to be set up and worshipped. That's true. And E, the mark of the beast is a commercial ID mark that has no religious meaning. No, okay, I didn't comment on that. That's false. It appears that the mark on the forehead, much like we see in Ash Wednesday and so forth, that may be very well be a mark of a priestly group or people who are considered of the upper echelon of worshipers of the beast. So it's going to have more than just a commercial meaning. It's going to also have a religious and spiritual meaning. Remember, it's only after they worship that they get the mark. So people will willingly take this mark. When it comes to that point in time, folks, it's very different than today. There's only going to be two choices out there. There's not going to be any atheists. You get it? They're going to either worship the beast or they're going to reject the beast and being worshiping Christ. One or the other. There's no middle ground anymore. There's no, I'm ambivalent, I'm not quite sure. No, it's one or the other. And there will be plenty of miracles done by the Antichrist through this false prophet that will be giving testimony to people that says, oh, he's the right one. He's the one that's going to save us. Remember, there's calamities going on all over the place. People are wondering, what's happening? Let the rocks fall on us, they say. It's going to be a terrible time with all these things happening. And then they're going to look at this Antichrist, and he's going to be one performing signs, miracles, and wonders to deceive the people, which God allows him to do. And they're going to say, he's the one that's going to save us. We're going to follow him. Jeff?
Yeah, the first 3.5 years, remember, he's on Israel's side.
Right.
So Israel is really in conflict. Could that be with Islam? possibly, or?
Israel is in conflict with what now?
With Islam at that time, and there's a big, massive, and the Antichrist, he sides with Israel and apparently wins out.
Okay, well, let's back up a second here. From a religious, spiritual standpoint, there's kind of like one game in town, and that one game in town is going to be the harlot, which we'll look at today. The harlot is I think, the apostate church is what we see right now. That's what we'll move into this first 3.5 years, and that will be this ecumenical movement with all of these different religions combined as one, a one world religion. That one world religion is whichever ladder you want to take to heaven, that ladder's good. And except if you are a follower of Jesus Christ and you claim that's the only way, guess what? You're intolerant and we're going to persecute you. That's what's persecuting the saints. The only ones that get a bye during that first 3.5 years is Israel, and they're allowed to worship whatever way they want to worship, right? In the temple. That's part of the deal they cut with the Antichrist. 7 years, and they get to set up all their worship system according to Daniel 9, which is what we looked at. They have a 7-year agreement, and they can set up their worship system and sacrifices it talks about in the temple. So they can worship whatever way they want, apart from the harlot, and that false religious system. And the only people being persecuted are the tribulation saints, the ones who are believers in Jesus Christ. They're the only ones. All right. Now, how does that fit with your question here?
Well, I guess it's a curiosity question. We know Islam is growing, and they're always been at war with Israel.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. So what?
Israel's not going away.
Okay.
What about
Islam? Okay. What about Islam? All right. Islam. There's a war that's going to happen. That's the Ezekiel 38-39 war. And if we look at the countries that are named, and they're called Gomer and Tormegath or something like that, and there's about 5 or 6 really foreign names to us. But if you look at an old map, you find that those are the nations that are Islamic. They're going to be led by Gog of Magog, and that's Russia. Russia's going to lead an attack, it appears, of the Islamic nations against Israel. And God's going to step in and destroy them. Destroy the armies, all right? At the same time, we're also seeing this movement that's taking place today of the ecumenical movement. And I've got a video, at one point I'll be able to show you this, where you actually see you see Islam and the Hindus and all of them all coming together with the Pope and as a one, and Protestant churches too, all coming together as one. So I think the remnant of that war and all of the other churches and religions all coming together, that's the harlot. That's the harlot that we'll see. And that's the one that controls quite a bit in that first 3.5 years. That harlot is really significant. We'll look at her in just a few minutes here. Okay, good question. Anybody else on that? All right, let's move forward here. And we're looking at the 3 angels. And we find that God sends, talk about grace and mercy. Here we go. 3 angels that he sends on the earth. And these 3 angels, they fly, it says, in mid-heaven. Well, mid-heaven is where the birds fly. Can you imagine seeing an angel of God flying around and talking to you? That's what God's going to do, these 3 angels. The first angel on 14a. The first angel brought the gospel message spoken in English, the international language. True or false?
True.
False.
Yeah.
You know what language he speaks in? The language of the people. Verses 6 and 7. Let's go to chapter 14, verse 6. And I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ, flying, to preach unto them that dwelt on the earth, to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. He's going to go around the world, and he's going to go to every different group of people in every different dialect and speak to them in a tongue that they understand. No person will ever be able to say, well, he spoke in a foreign language. I didn't take that foreign language, so I don't understand it. No. every dialect, not just every language, but every dialect, so everybody will understand it. Nobody will have any excuse. So that first one is false. It's in the language of the people. And then B, the second angel announced the fall of Babylon. Is that true or false? That is true. Why do you think that he would announce? The second angel goes around the world saying, hey, Babylon's going to fall. It's going to fall. Why would he say that? He's letting the people know that Babylon, which is the center, it's the commercial, political, and religious center of the earth. He's letting people know, don't trust in that. It's going down. He said, that dude's going down. Don't trust in that. And so it's a warning. The first one is the gospel. The second is a warning. It says, don't trust in Babylon. And what's the third here? The third one, which is C, the third angel pronounced judgment upon all those on the earth. Is that what he did? Verse 9 and 10. No. What does he warn them? We just read that. He said, don't take the mark of the beast. So God is through grace and his mercy, he's warning, and he's telling people, don't do these things and accept Christ. Here's the everlasting gospel. Here's the truth. So, how people would reject that, you wonder, seeing an angel flying around. But again, I would imagine that this time is going to be so filled with unusual events that they will just see that as, they'll almost be numb to that. Jeff?
Just trying to get my time. Would this be in the 3.5 years or after the Antichrist sets himself up as in the temple?
Okay. Well, just so happens to have a little timeline there as my next slide. Thanks for the setup.
Look at that. I think that was planned.
3 angels. 3 angels in mid-heaven. Why? Well, at mid-tribulation, the Antichrist gains world control, right? When he gains world control, probably the first thing that he's going to do is to consolidate his control. How do you do that? Well, you start getting people marked and identified. And so they will be told to start getting marked, and I take it that that's when these 3 angels will fly. That's the best I can do to try and, where do we place them? It makes sense that that's when that would take place. Again, I'm going to tell you that this timeline is just one timeline. This is the best shot that we can take. There are other ones out there that are okay. But I think from my opinion is this is the one that makes the most sense and the one that puts things together. All right, that I can explain and we make a story out. Bobby.
Steve, it makes me think too that even in today's system, people put their faith and their trust in their stocks, their banks, the things that they've accumulated on the earth.
Right.
Which really means we really need to put our trust in God.
We do.
That's why people trust that Harley, because once the Harley's down, then all the money they've accumulated, it's nothing.
Yep.
And I think that's what mankind has to realize, but God's going to bring us to that judgment.
Yeah. What you're talking about there is that's actually chapter 18. That's a commercial and political, and that's going to be all about greed, consumerism, and political consumerism, and all the commercial stuff that'll be taking place during that period of time, and all the trust that people will have in all these goods and services that are out there. Steve.
Yeah, and when you figure the angels warning people not to take the mark of the beast in their own language, okay, how can anybody see that and not believe? But then we're seeing this now with this fake news and all, that probably the Antichrist is fake news organization. Oh yeah, that's just laser imagery, or that's these blasphemers against the harlot. And clever technology to imitate, so there's going to be a lot of fake news then.
That's an interesting point, because don't you know that if the Antichrist has world control, guess who controls the media? He's going to control it. Talk about fake news. You're going to hear whatever he wants you to hear, and nothing else. That's a good point. Okay, so on chapter 14D, the 144,000 are also seen in this chapter celebrating victory with Christ. That answer is true. The 144,000, we see those in verses 1 through 4. This is remember we talked about color commentary parenthetical information. That's what this chapter is about. And what this does in the first four verses of chapter 14, it gives us a future look. It jumps ahead. It actually jumps all the way to here, right after this great day of the Lord, where there's a victory celebration of the 144,000 with the Messiah. And he's on Mount Zion, which is, of course, in Israel. So they've been recalled to Israel, and they're celebrating the victory at that point. So we see that as the first part of that chapter. Any questions on that, the 144,000, before we move on? Good. Okay, chapter 15 and 16, the bowl judgments. Ooh. Remember, the bowl judgments take place at the blowing of the seventh trumpet, and it's all the way here, almost to the very, very end of the tribulation. All right? So we're there. In chapter 15 and 16, we see these bowl judgments. The bowl judgments begin when the seventh trumpet sounds. That's true. These judgments will last for approximately 1 year. That's false. Why do we say that?
Because it's going to happen just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, it's going to happen boom, boom, boom. Good, Karen. But the bowl judgments are so severe. I mean, we can't even imagine this. Let's look at the bowl judgments. Let's read those things. Let's go to chapter 16. The first bowl. In verse 2. The first went out and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and there fell a foul and painful sore upon the men who had the mark of the beast, and upon them who worship the image. Okay? So there's these horrible, smelly sores that they get, terribly painful. That's the very first thing that happens. And it happens to everybody that been marked with the beast and worships the beast. So, as I said earlier, when we first studied this, probably little kids who've been forced to get a mark would not be hit with that. They wouldn't know to worship the image. Verse 3, the second bowl, what is that? We see that the sea, that's the salt water, the oceans, became blood of a dead man, and every living soul died in the sea. That means every form of sea life dies. Everything, at every strata, and everything just floats up. Again, you can imagine the stench of that. And then right on top of that, the third angel in verse 4, upon the rivers and fountains, everything of that, all the drinking water becomes blood. Remember that in the first four trumpet judgments, they were called the 1/3 judgments. That means 1/3 of the water of the sea, 1/3 of the drinking water. But now this is 100%. This is the whole deal. Yeah. So these things are being poured out upon the earth. Nobody's going to be able to survive that for any period of time. Heather.
So the people that have the mark are experiencing these judgments.
Yes.
What about the people that have chosen to follow Jesus?
They will not get the sores,
Okay.
but they will be exposed to the dangers of blood water. But what will they have and will be doing that the unbeliever won't be? They'll be reading their Bible. They will have known this is coming, right? So, I mean, a believer will say, this is coming, let's store up some water for this time. I would imagine that these folks are living, most of them are living in the really rough areas out in the sticks, in caves and that sort of thing, which will actually help them long term. Okay, so then the next thing we see is the sun that comes out in the fourth of the judgments, and that's in verse, the fourth angel pours out his bowl in verse 8. Upon the sun, and power was given to him to scorch men with fire. We looked at Isaiah, and Isaiah chapter 30 talked about how at that point the sun is going to increase its brightness by 7 times. And the moon will be as bright as the sun. So you can imagine the heat that's going to produce upon the earth. And I don't know about you, but I can hardly stand the heat right now. You know, what we're going through right now, the intense heat. Can you imagine jacking that up another 30, 40, 50
Would that
degrees?
be because the atmosphere has been thinned out and it's penetrating, there's no protection?
I don't know exactly what this causes. All I know is what Isaiah says, and he says 7 times. And the moon, too, is going to be at the same radiance of the sun. So that there's no darkness then. It's going to be light all night long. All right, so, and the heat is going to be almost unbearable. In other words, there's no reprieve. There's no cool time. It doesn't cool off. How about the 5th bowl? The 5th angel poured out his bowl upon the throne of the beast, and the kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain. So there's Babylon. Babylon's going to get hit with total darkness. It appears that the whole kingdom, though, was more than just Babylon. Probably the whole earth is going to be suffering with darkness, going from bright, bright, bright light to then total darkness, all day long.
Could that be a nova of the sun? They say when the sun novas, before it dies, and it's extremely bright, and then...
You know, I really don't know. We're going to see this, but we're going to see some very abnormal events here toward the very, very end of the tribulation. There's going to be earthquakes and all kind of crazy things that are going to be happening. Ultimately, God is going to rearrange the entire earth for the millennial kingdom. But after that 1,000 years, he's going to destroy everything, and it's going to be recreated. God is going to set up a new heaven and a new earth. I take all of creation will be affected. Yes?
I have a question. The end of that verse says, but they refused to repent of what they had done.
Yeah.
There will be an opportunity?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any opportunity. According to the warning given by the angel, that there won't be. I think what it's just showing is a hardness of heart, a continual hardness of heart. And we see that. We saw that with Pharaoh. The more the judgments came down upon Egypt, the harder his heart got. And don't we see that with people today? When people start rejecting Christ over and over and over again, they not only pass a point of being softened, they almost get belligerent toward Christ. And we are seeing a lot of that today. And I think that aggression we're going to see is going to be leading into ultimately to persecution.
Would anybody have that chance to repent if their hearts were that hard at that point?
I think they're gone at that point. And that's according to the angels that flew. They said, once you receive the mark, that's it.
Okay.
And that's because it says they worshipped, those that worshipped received the mark. You know, just like when we came to know Christ, I mean, nothing's going to change my heart or my mind now.
Yeah.
I'm gone. I'm sold out for him, right? You guys are sold out for him. But nothing's going to change your mind. The same with them. They're sold out to the beast.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's only 2 choices there.
That's it.
Christ or the Antichrist.
Yeah, Jeff? Yeah.
And in verse 8 it says, they curse the name of God and then they refuse to repent.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't indicate there's any remorse.
Oh no, there's none. I think what it's doing is showing us the heart of man, the heart of unregenerate man. They continue to curse God. The more that happens, they're too far gone. They're just cursing God now, and they're not going back on anything.
Is the mark received supernaturally?
I'm sorry, the mark what?
Is it received supernaturally?
Is it received? No, I take it that the mark is going to be something that will be either a tattoo or some type of a physical. It'll be a physically apparent mark on the forearm here or on the forehead. You'll be able to see that. It'll be something that'll be visible. But I don't think it'll be supernatural. I think it's technology, whatever that technology is. I would imagine a tattoo that's machine readable, something like that will be developed. Okay? We're okay? Good. So the 6th bowl of wrath there is the Euphrates is dried up. You know, why is that considered to be a judgment? Well, the Euphrates is dried up so that the armies of the east can cross it, and that's part of this final battle, the great and terrible day of the Lord that will take place. And of course, when the 7th bowl is poured out, it says it's done, it's over. And so it moves. The 7th bowl is all of these earthquakes and things that happen. Let's see where we can find that. The 7th bowl. 17? There we go, good. Seventh angel put out his bowl into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven saying, "It's done, it's finished." And there were voices and thunders and lightnings and a great earthquake, such as was not seen since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great that the great city, that's Babylon, was divided, Jerusalem. The great city Jerusalem was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God. So every city that's out there is going to be leveled, every one. New York City, gone. Rome, gone. London, gone. Every one of them will be leveled. And that's as a result of all these things that happen when the 7th is poured out and it is done. Christ returns, and man, for the unbeliever, it's done. It's over with. And we'll see that in chapter 19. We'll get more details about that. All right? All right, so the bowl judgments. Let's continue on with that. We're in C. The bowl judgments are God's direct wrath, judgments straight from heaven. That's true. God and through the seal judgments has worked primarily through man, through the trumpet judgments, through demonic, and now he's pouring these out directly from heaven. D. These judgments are the most intense and destructive of all judgments. Absolutely true. That's why it's at the very, very end. Man could not survive that. The 7th bowl finalizes the tribulation with the return of Christ, and that is true. He is true. And the last thing, the last chapter that we looked at, wow, missed that. I'm behind on my slides. The last chapter we looked at, which is called Spiritual Babylon, and that's what's called the harlot. Let's see. The tribulation is over. It is done. Chapter 17 and chapter 18, both of those are something of a flashback. They give us more detail, and they go back for us to look at. Chapter 17 looks at Babylon, and chapter 18 looks at Babylon, but they each look at from 2 different perspectives. Here's the 2 different perspectives. Chapter 17 is mystical, religious, spiritual Babylon. This is the harlot. This is the one that appears to be what this ecumenical movement is moving toward. The apostate churches will enter. Everybody know when I say apostate church, what I'm talking about there? Yeah? All right. Okay. The apostasy is one who would deny Christ, deny some attribute of Christ, turn their back upon the Savior, the one who has bought them. So we're seeing today that a lot of the mainline Protestant denominations are saying, well, did Jesus really rise from the dead? I mean, spiritually okay, but not physically, right? Or I think he's a creation of God, where Scripture tells us no. He has all the attributes of God. He was not a born or created person. He always was. He's eternal, right? But there are mainline churches that are starting to deny that. And so that's apostasy. When the rapture takes place, those people are not believers. They will not be taken up. But they'll still be religious, and they'll still be a part of a church. And that's what's going to be moving into the tribulation. So that chapter 17 is this thing, this woman called the harlot. A harlot is a woman who, and by the way, a woman is typically used in parallel with a religious system. All right. So the harlot is a woman who sells her body, herself, for power or money or both, some type of control. And that's what we see this spiritual organization doing. And we see her riding the beast. There's your 7-headed beast there, and she rides it, indicating that she has control of that beast. Chapter 18 focuses on the commercial, political Babylon, which is actually a literal city. There is a city, and that's the next chapter that we're going to be looking at. But now we're looking at this mystical, spiritual Babylon. We did a comparison of these, and we said that the religious spiritual Babylon is a church-type organization with broad spiritual control, called a harlot or a whore, rides on top of the beast to show control and dominance, also indicative of a state religion. It's associated with a city, and that was in verse 18, that sits on 7 mountains. And we studied that, and we said, well, wait, there's only one city that was said to be on 7 hills and 7 mountains, and that's Rome. So we think it's associated with Rome, dressed in purple and scarlet, indicating that it has a hierarchy. You know, royalty. The higher up you get, the better your clothes get, and royalty wore purple and scarlet, and it persecuted the saints. This is the one that persecuted them in the first half of the tribulation. Then the chapter 18, the commercial political Babylon, it's going to be the center that's going to handle all of the transactions for all the buying and selling that's going to happen in the world. And that's part of that mark that you receive, or that they will receive. It appears to be a vibrant port city that handles great shipping, uses the great harlot. This is interesting. This religious organization then destroys it. It turns and destroys the harlot. It will itself, commercial Babylon, be destroyed suddenly, and it could possibly be a literal rebuilt Babylon in Iraq on the Euphrates. So that's all the information that we studied on that, comparing those two. Okay, so let's go 17a. Although they are related, spiritual Babylon is a different entity than commercial political Babylon. That's true. That's what there's your differences right there. Very different. God calls spiritual Babylon a harlot and the mother of harlots. That's true. Why does he call her a harlot? Why does he call spiritual Babylon a harlot? Anybody remember that? What was the purpose of that? God compared idolatry to harlotry. He said anybody that worships an idol, that's like a harlot. Remember, the intimacy that God demands as a husband to a wife is for those two to share that, and only within them. Just those two would share that. But when a person turns to an idol or to a false god and worships that god, they are giving what's due to God to another person, a false god. And God says that's a harlot. And so he calls Babylon the mother of harlots. This one that if you remember right, we went back and we looked at Babel, the city Babel, and Nimrod. In Nimrod, they developed their own worship system, a ziggurat, the tower, the one that was going to reach the stars. God says, I want you to spread out and occupy the land. And they said, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We rebel against you. We're going to make a name for ourselves, and we're going to have our own religion and our own gods. And so that became the mother, the starting point of all of the false worship and false gods. Prior to that, before the flood, you never saw that. But that's when you start seeing false deities happen. And so when they spread, when God confused the language, they took their false gods with them, and each culture then has their own numbers of false gods and idols. And so going back, Babylon, the spiritual Babylon, is considered to be the mother of harlotry. Spiritual Babylon is a religious system that will facilitate the resurrected Roman Empire. And that is true. We're going to look at that just now. I think I have a few more minutes to cover this and we'll be finished. And finally, the 7th empire, the resurrected Roman Empire, will kill the harlot. That is also true. We're going to look at that right now.
Oh, you skipped D.
Huh?
D. 8 empires.
Okay, D, I'm sorry. The chapter speaks of 8 empires, with the 8th being the final ruling empire. That is true. That is true. We'll cover that. Yeah, they're all true. A through E is true. And I want to talk about this beast because that's what a lot of these questions are around. It's important we understand this so we understand what's coming and what it's a composite of. This is the beast that she rides. It describes that in Revelation 17. We want to go there. Revelation 17, 10 through 14. This is going to sound real confusing, and I'm going to try and break this out in the next 10 minutes. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other one has not yet come, But when it comes, it will continue for a short period of time. And the beast that was and is not, he is and is the eighth, and is of the seven that goes into perdition. It dies, the seventh. Verse 12, the 10 kings, 10 horns which you saw, are 10 kings. It defines what those horns stand for. Who have received no kingdom as of yet. This is in John's day. But receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, in a very, very short time again. Verse 13, these have one mind, and will give their power to the strength unto the beast. They're going to make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called the chosen and faithful. Okay, so let's break that stuff down. The first thing it talks about, there are 7 kings. These are 8 empires of Revelation chapter 17, 10, and 11. There are 7 kings it talks about. 5 are fallen. Okay, here it's talking about kingdoms, empires that are fallen. Again, you're in John's time, 95 AD. 5 are fallen. What are those 5 that have come before him? Egypt. Assyria conquers Egypt. Then came Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. They conquered Assyria. Then came Medo-Persia. Cyrus conquers Babylon. Then came Alexander the Great with Greece, conquers Medo-Persia. And then came the next one. 1 is, which is Rome. The 6th is, which is Rome. In John's day, Rome was the ruling empire of the day. So he said that's the one that is. So Rome, they conquered Greece. So every empire conquers the previous one except one. Rome was never conquered. Rome just kind of got eaten away a little bit at a time. If you in Rich's class, it just got deteriorated. Nobody ever really conquered Rome. All right. So the 6th is. The 7th to come is the restored Roman Empire. All right? And now let's take a look here back in verse 10. 7 kings, 5 are fallen, we went through that, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. So in John's day, the one that has not yet come is the 7th, and that will be the restored Roman Empire. How do I know it's restored Roman Empire? Why couldn't it be the Grecian Empire? Well, if you remember Daniel's statue, what came out of the 2 legs? The feet with 10 toes. Remember that? And those 10 toes represent the 10 kings. And that's and if you remember, it's iron mixed with clay, those 10 toes, and that's strong metal, but it's brittle, mixed with something that's very brittle. So it's sort of a weak confederacy is what you get a picture of. So, and then you see in verse 11, and the beast that was and is not, well, who was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7th. Well, the only thing that was not, then was not, and is the Antichrist. Remember? He was, then he was killed, or appears to be killed, and resurrected, and he is. So the 8th is going to be the empire of the Antichrist, and it's going to be the 8th and final empire, and that is this final beast that we see. That's what all that stuff means, I think.
Do you think
Right.
we're already living in the 7th with the European Union?
No, it doesn't appear to be, because it's going to be a 10-nation confederacy. There'll be 10 nations. I think, if you just hold on for that thought for a second, I think we'll see on a time chart how that's going to come about. But that's a good question. Anybody else on this? Jimmy?
Does Babylon has to come back big and strong and bold and all, buildings everywhere before all this happens? I mean, Babylon could be because Babylon's nothing right now.
Babylon is in ruins now.
Zero, right.
Chapter 18, we're going to cover that. Just hang on to that question. Good question. Okay, so that's your 8th and final is the beast. The 7 it talks about, it says it'll be here for 1 hour or a short period of time. What that indicates is that when this is resurrected, it's going to be a weak confederacy. And if you remember, it has 10 kings. And we go back to chapter 7 of Daniel, where it talks about 10 horns, but the little horn is going to kill or pull out 3 of those, right? So that that pulling out of the three, that's your final beast here, where the Antichrist has total control, and he is actually has 30% of the control. And it says in verse 13, these 10 have one mind, and they're going to give their power and strength to the beast. And that's that right here. Once he takes over from those three, this beast here is going to be the eighth and final. It'll be over with. Okay, so the beast that she rides, that's this thing here, this horrible looking thing. And what that's telling us is this eighth beast is going to have all of the evil of each of the preceding 7 empires. That's how bad it's going to be. That's how evil this thing is. And then we find in verses 16 through 18, let's look at that real quick. And the 10 horns which you saw upon the beast, that's the 7th empire, by the way. They hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So they're going to turn on this harlot that was helped to facilitate the restored Roman Empire, and they're going to kill that harlot. And it makes all the sense in the world that they do, and the reason is, remember the religion, the harlot, is something that's set up that any god matters, idolatry, but there's only one God that wants to be worshipped, and who's that? The Antichrist and Satan. And so they turn on the religious system and say, we don't need you anymore, you're out of here. Now everybody gets the mark of the beast, he's our Savior, he's on the earth. There's no reason to have a religion. And then on our timeline here, to try to put it all together, I got 2 minutes left. You'll notice a couple of things that I added. One is that the second seal, which is the red seal, will probably be, in my opinion, World War III. It's going to kill 1/4 of the population. To do that, you're talking about probably thermonuclear war worldwide. So we have World War III. I think what's going to happen is this 10-king coalition emerges from that. And the harlot, which I think gets started even before the tribulation starts, is actually in power early on and facilitates this. That out of World War III we get a 10-king coalition, and she continues on until the harlot is destroyed. At that time, that's when the Antichrist gains control, false prophet appears, mark of the beast, angels come out warning people, and so forth. So I think that that's kind of how things go, and that brings us right to the point to chapter 18, which we will definitely cover next week. Any questions? I got 1 minute left for questions. We're good?